You can't handle the truth.
What a gift, don't you think, from Mr. Wallace to the world?
Well, it's nice to see you, too.
Obi-Wan, we meet again at last.
Eddie, is there anything you can't do?
Hello and welcome to ReDiscover Movies. My name is Tyler Smith. I'm a film critic and college professor here in Los Angeles. I'm also the director of Valley of the Shadow, The Spiritual Value of Horror, which is a documentary that explores the complexities of scary movies. It's available here on ReDiscover Television right now. But that is not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about Eternals. Eternals is the latest Marvel movie, and it's directed by Chloe Zhao, who just last year won the Best Director Oscar for her film Nomadland. It may seem kind of strange that she would be tapped to direct this very big budget mainstream film, but there's a certain ethereal quality to Nomadland, so in many ways it makes sense that she would be the director of this film, which is about a group of cosmic beings known as Eternals being assigned by a celestial being to protect Earth from the Deviants, a species of brutal, bloodthirsty space animals of some kind. The Eternals are able to rid the Earth of the Deviants, but must remain on the planet until further notice. They're here for thousands of years, but it appears the Deviants are back in the modern day, so the Eternals get back together to figure out why. Okay, so I'm a Marvel fan. I grew up reading Marvel comics when I was a kid, and starting in 2008, when Samuel L. Jackson showed up as Nick Fury at the end of Iron Man, I was very excited to see what exactly was going on. And I really think that Marvel, for the most part, has done a great job of approximating what it's like to read comic books, where, yes, there are different lines, but all these characters exist in the same universe, and so they can dip into each other's, even if only for a scene or whatever. And so I think that Marvel has done a really wonderful job with that, especially when you have all these different franchises like Captain America and Thor and Iron Man, all of them leading up to a universal event, which in this case was the Infinity Saga in 2018 and 19. I think that was pulled off beautifully. The problem is it went so well, and it was such a big event that you find yourself wondering, like, what are they going to do now? And that is what Marvel has been trying to figure out. And so they've been leaning on established characters like Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, and Captain Marvel to help sort of bridge the gap with these newer characters like Shang-Chi. So obviously Marvel is going to be working towards another cosmic event, which means they need more cosmic characters. Obviously they still have Thor, they have Captain Marvel, they have the Guardians of the Galaxy, but they need even more. And so that's where the Eternals come in. These are not beloved mainstream characters like Captain America or Thor, so Zhao has to introduce an entire ensemble of characters that we have no real connection with emotionally or intellectually, and they haven't been mentioned in any of the previous films, so it's a completely new situation. And so the question is, how does the introduction go? Not great, to be honest with you. The film has a really solid cast. It's got Richard Madden, it has Kumail Nanjiani, Angelina Jolie, Salma Hayek, really solid actors, and they do their best to really realize these characters so that we really feel a connection with them. The problem is that the story is so dense that any character development is brought to a screeching halt so that the audience can be explained everything in a lot of detail, so that the film ultimately sort of feels like more of a lavish Wikipedia entry than an actual movie. But it is lavish. The film is visually gorgeous, which I would expect from Chloe Zhao. I'm a big fan of Nomadland, and its ability to marry these vast landscapes and intimate character portraits. Eternals tries to do the same thing, but the mainstream nature of the story sort of undercuts that. And so even though the film is very long, and it is very long, it doesn't somehow feel quite long enough to do everything that I think Chloe Zhao wanted to do and everything that the film needed to do. As I mentioned, the cast does a very good job, specifically Kumail Nanjiani, who brings a lot of humor and humanity to his character. But frankly, I think there are just too many characters for us to feel particularly invested with any of them, really. The film does have some interesting points to make. We're dealing with characters who are immortal and are thus in a position to witness the whole of human history. So there's some big ideas going on there, like whether or not humanity itself is worth defending or redeeming. And while I do think that this is an interesting question, Chloe Zhao clearly sees it as an opportunity to incorporate some ideology into the film. As proof of humanity's brutality, we see Europeans decimating indigenous peoples, and we see the aftermath of the Hiroshima bombing. We don't see any communist atrocities. We don't see any Middle Eastern oppression. We are shown only the sins of the West. And while I'm not one to suggest that the United States and Europe are in any way blameless, certainly we've had our part to play in some pretty horrendous things in the history of humanity. These choices feel more politically motivated. I'm totally fine with the filmmaker having a point of view. I prefer my films have a point of view. Certainly there's plenty of brutality in the history of mankind, but it sort of feels like this film is picking and choosing what it depicts so that it fits a certain agenda. So as I was watching all this stuff with the Eternals, I was put in mind of Robert Wise's wonderful science fiction film, The Day the Earth Stood Still, which was released in 1951, right at the beginning of the Cold War. The story is about an alien named Klaatu, played by Michael Rennie, who comes to Earth and lives amongst the humans. He wants to get a sense of who we are, and like in Eternals, if humanity as a species is worth saving. He and the Federation of Planets has determined that we are a huge danger to ourselves and possibly to them as well. So as Klaatu reveals himself to us, he also gives us a warning.
It is no concern of ours how you run your own planet. But if you threaten to extend your violence, this Earth of yours will be reduced to a burned-out cinder.
It's a wonderful film, and it's currently available on ReDiscover Television, and I highly recommend checking it out. Eternals, on the other hand, is a beautiful-looking movie, and it has a lot going for it, but I didn't find it very engaging. I have no doubt that it will be important in the larger story of what Marvel is doing. Unfortunately, on its own, it just isn't that interesting. So I think you can probably skip it. So that's it for this episode of ReDiscover Movies. I'm Tyler Smith. Thank you so much for watching.